Coming to you straight from Fremont, California, this is the Fremont Podcast, dedicated to telling the stories of the past and present of the people and places of the city of Fremont, one conversation at a time. Now, here's your host, Ricky B.
Welcome to episode number 1 of the Fremont Podcast. I am Ricky. My goal in creating this podcast is to bring the community of Fremont together by introducing each of you to the special people and places that make up our city. Hopefully, this is the beginning of many more conversations with many of you. So thank you for being a part of this podcast. Before we jump into the first episode, I'd like to give a big shout out to Gary Williams, who you just heard introduce this podcast. Gary also is a resident of Fremont. It's possible that you have heard his voice before at a Raiders game or other local Bay Area university sporting events. I'm really grateful to have him introduce us each week to every new episode. I'm hoping this first episode will serve as a very basic introduction to the city of Fremont. I've asked Miles of Fremont Gear to join me. I hope you enjoy it. All right, I am really excited to have Miles from Fremont Gear here with me in this inaugural episode of the Fremont Podcast. We're actually recording live downtown in Niles, and I'm excited to have Miles with me. Miles?
Yes, sir. What's going on, everybody?
It's good to have you, man.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. Oh, man. I love your stuff. When you started putting Fremont Gear out, I just fell in love with all the work you do. I think it's great.
I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. And so before we get on to what we have planned, I want to hear a little bit about you. You love Fremont. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on this episode is just because when I see, even through your Instagram, I just see this love and this energy that Fremont gives you. You have a love for Fremont. And so I wanted to have somebody here that seemed to have just a great love for this place, who knew a lot about it. You seem to know a lot about Fremont. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, when did you arrive in Fremont, and why is it that you what do you love about Fremont? Tell me a little bit of your story.
Sure. I lived in Fremont pretty much my whole life, for the good majority of my life. Fremont Gear started out of a necessity. Being young, I like to wear a lot of San Francisco fitted hats and Oakland A's fitted hats, and I just felt like there wasn't a lot of options for me to represent where I'm from. So I started as a clothing brand, but what interested me mostly about it is just the stories that the people of Fremont tell, like the unique stories and just like the experiences people have, and just learning new things about the city that I lived in my whole life, and them just like showing me new things that I haven't seen before, and just people sharing stories, really. Yeah,
that's great, man. I think that one of the things that made me want to do this podcast is that as I moved here 7.5 years ago, and I just really loved the diversity of people and all the different opportunities for experiences. So like right now we're actually recording this down in Niles, but you can go to different parts of Fremont and it's a completely different vibe. It's a completely different experience somewhere else. And I just think that there's so much diversity, but there's a lot of beauty in that as well. And so actually I got a question for you.
Sure.
So we've talked about this, and I've seen you post this on your Instagram. Fremont, according to Wallet Hub, Fremont, according to Wallet Hub, is the #1 happiest city in America. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what comes to your mind when you see
Personally,
that?
I don't know what their metrics are. I'll take it. If it's putting Fremont on the map, I'll take it.
That's right.
Surveying the people of Fremont, they feel differently.
Yeah.
But I'll take that title.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, maybe the happiness part of it is not necessarily something that's as obvious to be seen or to be heard. Maybe people are just so happy that they're not interested in being on social media and talking about it. Maybe they're just out doing
living life.
Yeah, living their life. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to do for this opening episode of the Fremont Podcast was I wanted to come up with our own list of 10 interesting facts about Fremont. Now, I'm more of the newbie. I've been here 7.5 years. I've had conversations with people that are maybe moving here or they're new to Fremont, and they're discovering some of the basic facts about Fremont. And so my 5 that I have chosen to contribute to this list of 10 are more basic. But you've lived here your whole life, and
good majority of my life. Yep.
Yeah. So you actually have some facts that are quite interesting. So I'm excited about this list. So I'm going to start off first. So these are These are not top 10. These are just 10 interesting facts that we would like to share about Fremont as we introduce the Fremont podcast. So this is something that I think is important for people to know about Fremont, especially if you're new to Fremont or you're new coming to Fremont. My first one is that Fremont is made up of 5 districts. And at one time, those 5 districts were 5 separate individual communities or little towns on their own. So we have Niles, which is where we are now. We have Warm Springs, which is the far south of Fremont, and then Irvington, Centerville, and then Mission San Jose. So those are the 5 now they're districts, but they were all individual communities. That's one of the things, if you come to Fremont or if you're in Fremont, you realize that there's not a clear downtown main street in Fremont. We basically have 5, you might say 5 downtowns in Fremont. So that's my number 1. Number 2, what do you got, Miles?
So there was a scene in Terminator 2, one of the greatest action and sci-fi films to be ever made.
What?
Filmed in Fremont, California.
What? No way, man. Are you serious?
Yeah, serious. So at the end of Terminator 2, where they're in that building and all the cops come, that was filmed on the border of Fremont and Milpitas.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That is awesome.
Yep. Someone commented on one of the Fremont Gear posts that the cast and crew actually stayed at the Hilton in Newark, and like the people of Fremont were able to see lights and explosions and hear the explosions from the set. Yeah. While they were filming.
That's awesome. Wow. So a scene from Terminator 2 at the end was filmed right here in Fremont.
Correct. Yep.
That's awesome. That's an amazing
one of my favorite movies for sure.
Yeah. Well, okay. So number 3, my next fact or interesting fact about Fremont, it actually happens almost in an exact location, very similar location, is that the very first Apple factory, if you're listening to this episode on Apple iTunes or listen to it through an iPhone or an iPad or an Apple computer, the very first Apple factory was here in Fremont in Warm Springs. And then eventually they closed it down and it ended up moving overseas. But the very first Apple factory was right here in Fremont in Warm Springs. So that's my number 2. That's number 3. Number 4. Give me number 4.
Number 4. So the rapper MC Hammer, once he got rich, he decided to move to Fremont, California. Yep. The realtors were trying to show him different areas: Atherton, Woodside, Blackhawk, where like E40 lives, and he chose Fremont.
That's awesome! Wow. So MC Hammer was right here in Fremont.
Can't touch this.
That's awesome, man. That's great. All right, so I've got another interesting fact. This one's actually more for probably just the trivia nerds, or it may not be that interesting. It's definitely not as interesting as Terminator 2 and as MC Hammer, but Fremont is the 4th largest city in the Bay Area. So Fremont is actually a very large city land-wise, but we also have the 4th largest population. So you've got San Jose number 1, San Francisco number 2, Oakland number 3, and then Fremont is number 4. And I don't know how long this is actually going to take, but I did read something, an article. I think it was from the most recent census that was done, that Oakland's population has been diminishing over the last 10 years, and Fremont's getting bigger and bigger. So maybe at some point in the next 10 years, maybe Fremont will be the third largest city in the Bay Area. So that's mine. All right. So what's your next fact? This should be number 6 on our list.
Next fact. The first building built in Irvington was built by a freed slave.
Really?
Yep. Shortly after the Civil War, he traveled to Fremont from the southern United States. He noticed a lot of foot traffic from the railways and from people in the 5 corners of Irvington, and he decided to build a tavern and an inn.
Wow, that's amazing. So the first building built in Irvington was built by a freed slave. Oh my goodness.
And it was just demolished in the 80s, I believe.
Wow. That's crazy. Wow. That's a great fact. That is really, really cool. All right. So this is one that I love personally. Matter of fact, Miles and I were just talking before we went on the air here and I'll just go ahead and say the fact. This is, I think, number 7 in our list. Kristi Yamaguchi, the figure skater who won the gold in the 1992 Winter Olympics, is from Fremont. And she grew up here in Fremont, and she's kind of the hometown hero even to this day. For me personally, I was not interested. I did not know much about the Olympics before the 1992 Winter Olympics, and that was probably the first Olympics that really caught my attention. And Kristi Yamaguchi won the gold medal that year. And so for me, she was one of the first people that I recognized in Olympic stardom. So, but she grew up here, and she's still a hometown hero. All right. So number 8, what do you got there, Miles?
So this one's a little bit obscure. Not a whole lot of people know about this one, and it's not there anymore. But there was once a place called, or known to the locals as Hobo Jungle.
Hobo Jungle.
Hobo Jungle.
Really?
Yeah, not a lot of people know about this. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
So right where the Aqua Park is, there used to be a swim lagoon over at Lake Elizabeth.
Okay.
So the back behind the swim lagoon, there was just dense forest. There was just overgrown trees and bushes. And if you follow the trees and if you follow along, you'll find a little clearing.
Really?
Yeah, in between the bushes. So if you go in through there, there's little pathways and little trails through the dense forest where you'll find like I don't want to say rooms, but they're kind of like rooms. There was just like a little clearing here, and then if you follow the path this way, there's another little clearing, and it's just places to chill. We found like empty like food wrappers, like empty DVDs.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if like homeless people actually live there, but that's just what the locals called it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hobo Jungle.
Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, and I actually have a kind of like a funny story.
Yeah, tell me. Yeah.
So me and my buddies, this was maybe 2007, 2008. We were just being kids, and running around the city, exploring and stuff. And we stumble upon Hobo Jungle. Yeah, and this is it was right during sunset. We find Hobo Jungle, and we're like, whoa, we got to explore this place. So we explore it. We find a whole bunch of stuff, and it just gets darker and darker and darker. And then all of a sudden, it just gets too dark to see, and we get lost in Hobo Jungle.
No.
Yeah, we were lost for maybe like an hour or two.
Wow.
Just trying to find our way out. Yeah. And eventually, we find ourselves like on one side of the river, and the other side of the river is where we needed to be.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah. So in pitch black, we just march through the river, get all wet. Yeah. And by this time, like our parents are calling us, "Where are you? Come home now." I'm like, "Mom, I'm trying. I can't. I don't know how to get out of here."
Wow. That was probably before the days they actually put flashlights on the phones too.
Right,
You're
right.
probably walking in the dark.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What a great story. That's a great memory right there, man. That's awesome. All right. So we're down to number 9. This is my last fun fact or interesting fact about Fremont. And this is actually pretty well known for people who live here. Although I will say, I was just talking to people. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were telling me that they've lived here, 15, 20 years, and they had never been down to Niles. Like they did not know much about Niles, and they just recently discovered it. So
it's tucked back here.
Yeah, so I don't want to take it for granted that people have actually been here and they know about this. But Fremont, or Niles specifically, is, I guess, what you might call the original Hollywood. Bronco Billy started the SNA studio here, and he thought it would be a great place to film Westerns. And so back during silent film days, he built some of the buildings, and actually some of the buildings he built for the movies are still standing. They're still being used here. But then Charlie Chaplin, who was really famous for his silent movies, he filmed some of his films here as well, and then eventually moved down to LA, where everything took off and it became the Hollywood that we know. But Niles was kind of the original Hollywood. It was the place that a lot of these original silent films were made. And actually, if you come down to Niles downtown, number one, the people of Niles have really done a great job of trying to preserve it and to try to keep some of the character that was there from those days. And then there's also a silent film museum that you can tour as well, and they've got a lot of fun facts about the SNA studios and all of that down here. I think every once in a while too, I think during the summers they actually show some of the silent films that were filmed here as well, so you can take advantage of those. All right, number 10. Miles is going to wrap it up here with number 10 of our interesting facts of Fremont. What do we got, Miles?
So Fremont has left its mark on McDonald's history.
What?
Yeah. The first quarter pounder was invented in Fremont in 1972.
What?
Yes, sir.
No way. That is awesome.
It was created by franchisee Al Bernardin. He was experimenting with his own menu items, and he was trying to come up with the perfect ratio between meat and bun.
Well, I will tell you, I don't eat at McDonald's much anymore, but when I do, I usually get the quarter pounder. So I think that he was onto something there. He found a good ratio between those. So the quarter pounder, people can thank Fremont, California for being the birthplace of the quarter pounder.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. Wow, these are great. And you know what? There's probably so many other great facts about Fremont out there. One of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast in the first place was because in the 7.5 years that I've lived here, I've ran into so many different people with so many different stories. And there's so many just like treasures around every corner. There are stories of people who have come to the United States from outside of our country and have tried to make a living here. People that are still doing that to this day. And then there's people that have lived here their entire lives and they've grown up here. And those stories are just beautiful, interesting stories to be told. So I'm hoping that we can tell more of those stories, find more of those people. But before we wrap this up, Miles, I'd be interested if you have anything, any final words, or if you can just tell us where we can find more about Fremont gear. Like if people want to represent our city, where can they get some of the gear? Sure.
If you want to support and rep some Fremont gear, we're online at fremontgear.com. You can pick up all of our gear, all of our shirts, hats. We have tote bags, hoodies. And if you want to just follow us and just be part of the Fremont community, you can find us at Fremont Gear on Instagram.
Nice. Yeah. So just search for Fremont Gear on Instagram and they can find you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
That's awesome. So you've got hats, you've got sweatshirts, t-shirts, anything else that you can find there?
Well, I think that's it at the moment. We're working on more gear. And if you guys have any suggestions, if there's any type of clothing you guys want to see, let us know. Send us a DM or send us a comment. We'd love to hear you.
That's great. Well, Miles, thank you for joining me on this episode number 1 of the Fremont podcast. I will say that I hope to have you again. Maybe down the road we'll do another special one and you can be back on here. But
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great.
Thanks for having me, Ricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Miles.
You've been listening to the Fremont Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever it is that you listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you're so inclined, leave a kind review so that others can find the podcast. To stay connected with us, you can find links to our social media and other content at thefremontpodcast.com. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by Ricky B. Music provided through soundstripe.com. I'm Gary Williams. Join us next week on the Fremont Podcast.